This video will be covering my experience of what it was like to create my first ever Webtoon comic. It will be covering the premise of my comic, my character design process, script writing, making page layouts, line work for the pages, colouring of the pages, and an overview of my experience and what I learned from it. For the premise of my comic, I decided to make an LGBTQ+ fantasy comic. The basic premise is a closeted transgender female-to-male princess runs away from home on the day of her choosing ceremony, a celebration on people's 16th birthday where they must pick an animal to adopt the abilities and skills of. For example, if you pick a bird, you get wings and better eyesight. If you pick a wolf, you get ears, a tail, and the senses of a wolf. Her mother expects her to pick something that she doesn't want to. Before the ceremony, she hears a voice calling her name deep within the forest. She goes to investigate and encounters a water spirit that drags her into a lake. When the princess emerges, she has been transformed into a boy. The water spirit explains that her power is restoring things to how they were initially intended to be. The princess, now a prince, decides to hide out in a nearby tower until he has decided how to explain all of this to his mother, the main antagonist of the comic. In the tower, he meets a timid boy who apparently rescued a princess from the tower, but was too afraid of the height of the tower to leave himself. Meanwhile, his mother sends the head of the royal guard and a bounty hunter to track down the prince, believing he's been kidnapped. After I had my plot, I moved on to my character designs. I initially used Autodesk Sketchbook to make my designs as it was an app I was familiar with. I started out with rough ideas of what I wanted for my main two characters. I knew what I wanted their animal spirits to be, and based all of their design choices on those. For example, Artemis, the boy from the tower, is designed based on a bubo owl. To show this, I gave him hair that mimicked the shape of the owl's feathers, and large yellow glasses, like the owl's eyes. Using Artemis as the main example, I knew I wanted his design to be more muted and steampunk inspired. I used Pinterest to find some inspiration and made some different variations of his outfit. He was by far the hardest character to design, but definitely my favourite. I knew I wanted his colour scheme to be mainly brown, however I was playing with some of the adjustment settings and realised I also liked a blue colour scheme. I'll be using the brown colour palette as it fits best with his character, but I do also like the blue. I knew that I wanted the characters' colours to match their chosen animal, but I wanted the main character, Princess Bronwyn, to be a mystery, so that after they choose, it is shown how they transform. Purple was my initial choice for Bron, as I think it invokes feelings to do with royalty, and it complements the yellow in their design nicely. It also brings out the warm skin tone I chose for them as well. I have to admit there was less thought put into this colour scheme, and it will probably change when the character chooses their animal form. This is the reason I opted to try out the green, because it relates to his chosen animal, whereas the purple doesn't. I liked both colour schemes, but ultimately decided on the purple. I'll probably have it changed to better match his choice, which could be a nice way to show his development through the story. As for the other characters, I found an interesting resource called Palette Generator, where I took images of the animals they were based off of and generated a palette from that. It was a nice starting point for their colour schemes. For example, the Queen, who's the main antagonist of the comic, is based off of a black swan, so I generated a palette and then made the colours more blue instead of grey. I used the red in the swan's beak as an accent colour throughout her design. I did the same with the chameleon bounty hunter and the armadillo guard characters. After this, I started on character turnarounds. I sketched out turnarounds for the main two characters. I thought those were the most necessary since they will be on screen most of the time. I created a turnaround for the princess before they meet the water spirit and for one after they transform. Making Artemis's hair look correct all the way around was a struggle, and I'm not totally sure I succeeded, but I tried my best. After the turnarounds, it was time to write my script. I find that having my designs before I write helps me better visualise the characters and the settings. The parts shown in this video equate to about 3.5 pages of script. There isn't a lot of dialogue in this scene, so it was a lot of paragraphs of description. I used the Word script template to help me lay out my script. The first step in the actual drawing process were the layouts. A layout is basically a sketch where you focus on shot composition and character placement. After writing, I moved on to thumbnailing my pages. Webtoon works in a vertical scrolling format, so my page layout had to be able to accommodate that. I watched a few videos by McKay and Gray on layouts and script writing, as they have experience making comics for the Webtoon format. It really helped motivate me and helped me break down a large task into smaller chunks. My layouts were messy and no doubt confusing to anyone other than myself, but they did the job. The line work was what definitely took the longest, and actually ended up eating into my colouring time. Line work has always been my least favourite part, but Procreate has some nice brushes which made it a lot easier. These are the two brushes that I used throughout the comic. Because making the line art took up so much time, I had very little time, and I'll admit motivation, for colouring each page. I decided to make my comic grayscale, with only key panels and speech bubbles being coloured. I think the use of colour really added some visual interest to the panels. I also made the water spirit coloured throughout. It helps her to stand out and emphasises her magical nature. I really enjoyed using the blue lighting on the grey colour palette, and that page actually ended up being my favourite out of all of them. Overall, I enjoyed making the comic. I was surprised how quickly I was able to do all the planning for it, such as character designs and script writing. However, I severely underestimated how long it would actually take to draw each of the pages. The layouts were difficult, the line work was tedious, and I ran out of time to fully colour it. Even though at times it could be extremely frustrating, and having to use an app I hadn't used before came with a bit of a learning curve. This was definitely an experience I will learn from. I've been using Webtoon for a while and really like the scrolling format. I think it makes the comics way more immersive, and I think it's a lot clearer to read through. I've been wanting to try and make a comic for a while, and this project really gave me a chance to see what it was like. I've learned a lot about how long things take and scheduling my time more effectively, as well as my motivations and tolerance for repetitive work. I'm glad I gave making a comic a go, and although it didn't turn out how I expected, I'm going to continue improving this skill in the future. Thank you for watching.